17-year-old Carmelo Anthony was silent after bonding out of the Collin County Jail and being placed on house arrest.
How is this self-defense?
2 days after the family of Austin Metcalf buried their son, they were at the Collin County Courthouse for a bond reduction hearing Monday. Carmelo Anthony is accused of stabbing and killing Metcalf at a Frisco track meet earlier this month.
We've been talking a lot about the Democrats and their support, essentially, for criminals, for violent, hardened criminals in some cases, and this pathology that leads them to want to support the criminals getting out of jail, like they just did. And we played the video for you earlier in the program of Carmelo Anthony, someone who we know stabbed and killed a teenage football star, 16 years old, Austin Metcalf, down in Texas, and he's walked out. He just walks right out of court. Now he's on home arrest. And this is something that people need to understand. That feeling that you feel when you see someone like this be let out, that's what they want you to feel. That's exactly how they want you to feel. It's a system. In fact, it's a playbook. It's called anarcho-tyranny. Anarchy for the criminal, tyranny for you. That's why it's called anarcho-tyranny. So when it comes down to it, though, we're looking at these cases, Carmelo Anthony, the Maryland man hoax. What is it about these criminals that makes the Democrat, and really you see it across the left, you see it on TikTok, we were talking earlier about this with Gen Z, why is it that they go all in on these cases?
They do it all the time, Jack. It's such a great observation, because the two reactions to this MS-13, a gang member who is now in El Salvador, the Carmelo Anthony story, the reaction is linked. There is a pathological sympathy toward criminals, toward people who do harm on society. And the innocent, the people who abide by the law, are, for whatever reason, always cast aside. Nobody cares. And this is actually, and you documented it really well in your book, Jack, that I have read and I've cited in On Humans, the way that Marxists behave, textbook behavior. They will always sympathize with the criminal because there is always some systemic oppression that can be used to excuse bad behavior. People are not viewed as moral agents. And in Christians, as Christians in a Christian society, in Western thought, we believe that individuals have agency. There is a difference, a real deep and a theological difference between these two ideologies, and you can see it play out, and it in the past, but even now in the present. And what it creates, Jack, is chaos in society. It creates disorder and it creates chaos. And the people who always lose are those who follow the rules and are good people.
Well, and that's exactly right, and that's why it is done. And I keep trying to explain this to people, and we saw this, by the way, with George Soros and the DAs all across the country. That used to be something that would get you in trouble for talking about. Oh, don't mention that. It's like he's doing this all over the country, from San Francisco to L.A. to New York to Denver, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Detroit, Chicago. It doesn't matter. Every major city, St. Louis, they were getting this. And now we've got a case in Frisco, Texas, where even after committing an heinous act like this, you have this individual, Carmelo Anthony, who gets let out. The family has a legal defense fund up on Give, Send, Go, and they're using that to do what? Oh, they're buying a new house. By the way, I'm also seeing online, just during the show, people are sending me comments that they're actually renting a new house, not purchasing a new house. So, we'll leave the jury out on that specifically. But either way, this is obviously personal expenses. This isn't meant what it's done for. But again, Evita, isn't this what we always see communists do? They raise money in the name of criminality, and they don't use it for social justice. They use it to line their own pockets. And so when I hear people say, oh, this is crazy, this is horrific, I say, man, you haven't read the book yet. You haven't read the book yet, because if you read the book, or if you just understood the basics of what happened in Russia, what happened in China, what happened in France in the French Revolution, and then, of course, as you know from your own family history, which you've talked about so many times, Spain and the Spanish Revolution, this is what they do every single time.
And it's so clearly a scam, Jack. I remember, I think the goal was like $200,000, like just a few days ago, and suddenly now it's $500,000 because they're over 400,000. Like the price just keeps going up. What could they possibly need this money for? The guy's already, posted bail after it was reduced to, I think it was 250,000. What do they need the money for, right? Again, it is to line their own pockets. This is what always happens. And I'll also say, Jack, that there's this idea that if you're a part of a marginalized group, if you think that you're part of an identity group that's going to be sympathized with by the Marxists, that then you're safe, you're good to go. And that has never been true. This idea that the left cannibalizes itself is not just something we say. This is what happens every time. There was I think you might have mentioned it in your book. G. Van Fleet has mentioned it many times. There's a story of this school teacher who during the Chinese Cultural Revolution, she was a communist card carrier, and she actually was part of stoning these 4 landlords. And then years later, her own students, because she was somebody who cared about education and tradition, actually beat her to death. They had her kneel on broken glass. Her body was just shattered. And she killed by her own students. And this is, again, somebody who was a leftist, a communist in China during the revolution. This happens over and over again. So if you think that because you're part of some identity group that's being protected for now, don't think that means you're going to continue to be protected in the future.
Well, and we just saw, and we talked about it earlier this week, we talked about yesterday, that Governor Josh Shapiro, a Democrat governor in Pennsylvania, just had his home firebombed, the governor's residence, firebombed by Molotov cocktail by an avowed card-carrying socialist, BLM, a white supporter of BLM. And the Democrats want to play footsie with the Luigi left. They want to play footsie with the Tesla terrorists, go firebomb the Teslas. Do you understand that at some point they will eventually come for you? The snake always eats its own tail. We talk about this in chapter 13 of the Unhumans book, where we call it the Ouroboros option, and the snake eventually always eats its own tail. Or, as an example, the Bolsheviks overthrew the Mensheviks, who overthrew the Russian Empire, the Tsars, the Romanov family. Well, they tried to institute this Russian Republic for about 6 months. They didn't like it. They said, oh, this isn't moderate. This is too moderate. You're not going hard enough. You need to go much further. And so these are classic Bolshevik tactics that we've seen again and again. You bring together a coalition of the fringes of society, the dregs of the society, while you're using, by the way, the violent criminals to pacify the populace who might otherwise try to get in your way.
That's exactly right, Jack. And I'll just say that the lying comes hand in hand with this as well. The media lies. This is, again, textbook behavior. Why are we creating some narrative that this is a Maryland American citizen who's being deported to El Salvador as if it's your neighbor? This is a complete, the guy is a citizen of El Salvador. The guy has ties to gangs, an MS-13 gang member. And there's this narrative now, and you're seeing it a lot on TikTok because, again, they're not truthful about the news, that this could happen to any of us, that any American citizen could just be deported by this fascist, horrific Trump admin. And then you realize, oh, he's actually an El Salvadoran citizen. He came here illegally, and he's part of MS-13. You just lie about the facts, and you can create whatever narrative you want around it. And anything, whether it's killing, whether it's violence, or it's just having a complete disregard for the truth, is justified if it is in the name of progress.
Right, and it's all in the name of progress. So remember, boys and girls, communism is only 1 or 2 mass killings away from utopia. It's always right after the mass killing. The utopias come. We're going to come. We promise. Don't worry about the new homes that we're renting. Don't worry about these massive mansions that we're all living in, or Patrisse Cullors of BLM getting her 5 mansions. No. Bernie Sanders is I think he's on his 6th mansion. I lost count. Honestly, I can't keep track of all of the Bernie Sanders mansions that he's got. Has AOC sold her Tesla yet, by the way? I'm not sure. Maybe she set fire to it. We'll see. But when it comes down to it, folks, just understand that this is all part of the playbook. Look, I would love to go back to the type of politics that we used to have in this country, where we had issues, we debated the issues, and then we came to an agreement about what we were going to do to come forward and have an actual compromise in this country. We haven't had that for a long time. We haven't had it for a long time. It's been 20 plus years. And I think what you're seeing with Gen Z, and Evita, we've got a minute till the break, but I want to ask you about this after the break, is the way that Gen Z has a different take on this, because coming up in I think this really caustic, I'll say politically tumultuous time, I think it's really polarized a lot of Gen Z.
Yes, it has. And I would love to get into that. And I think Bernie Sanders is sort of at the helm of symbolizing this young youth movement. And then we're realizing that, oh, he doesn't really care so much with workers because Trump is trying to stand up for them as we're dealing with China, as we're dealing with unfair trade policies. And the jig is up, and we're realizing the actual motivations behind people like AOC and Bernie.